So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Town of Milton Planning Board's monthly meeting for August 2021. Ms. Nealon, would you please call the attendance of the board?
Mr. Marsicano?
Here.
Ms. Padula?
Here.
Ms. Stevens?
Here.
Mr. Whittle?
Here.
Chairman Bartow?
Here.
Mr. Chairman, can you please let me record it?
Oh, yes.
Not giving me the option to record.
How do I do that?
It just says, please ask the host to give permission to record. I'm not sure how. Do you make me a co-host down there?
Should be able to do it now. Tina?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so we've got that poll under the board here. I'd also like to note that we have in attendance our engineer, Joel Bianchi, our counsel, William Kennery, and Bill Lewis, the director of our codes division, as well as Patty Nealon, the secretary. We'll start this evening with the pledge to the flag.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so we continue to meet in person as well as remote engagement of project representatives and the public. We have a couple of opportunities for the public to interface with us this evening, and I'd ask that if you're Zooming with us and you want to make a public comment, please use the hand wave feature to alert us to your interest in commenting. You may also use the Q&A feature to submit a question. However, we will not accept anonymous questions or comments. Please submit your name with your question or your comment. If you dialed in on the phone feature of Zoom and would like to make a comment, please text Bill Lewis at 518-376-1831 and provide him your name and interest in commenting. The problem is I can't be had both on the microphone and have my computer on mute or unmuted.
No, you can unmute yours. I
Okay.
muted mine.
Oh, you muted yours, okay. All right, thank you. Sorry about that, everyone. Another announcement I have is that on July 31st, Ms. Padula and I met with Frank McClanahan at the Milton Road Solar Farm to review the visual mitigation of the project. Mr. McClanahan has agreed to some berm work as well as additional tree screening. He committed to drafting a memo outlining what we have discussed. And Mr. Lewis, I would just ask that you follow up with him regarding that, make sure we get that memo. He did indicate that he may wait till fall and possibly spring on some of the plantings and stuff, trying to coordinate with other work. I didn't have a problem with that, but I'd just like to get a commitment.
Will do.
And then I also want to note that I shared with all the board members earlier today a recent opinion from the New York Committee on Open Government that outlines remote participation of public board members in meetings now that the governor's executive orders have expired. He had in place orders suspending requirements of the open meetings law, which allowed board members as well as the public and presenters to participate remotely. But now we go back to the conditions of the open meetings law, that if a board member is going to try to participate remotely, we have to public notice and we make available the location, so if the public wanted to come and observe, they could come and observe. So I think what we're going to generally do is just go back to the board members all meeting here. If for some reason somebody has to participate remotely and we haven't done that notice, they can't count towards a quorum or vote on projects. They could participate in the discussions, they could follow the record, but they wouldn't be part of the quorum. So just take a look at that if you have any questions. I don't expect we're going to see any changes to that. I think there'll be people, I hope, that will propose amendments to the open meetings law to allow more remote participation, but there is some strange things in the current law that's written. Our first order of business this evening is the review and approval of the minutes from our July board meeting. I will entertain a motion to approve the July 21st, 21 meeting minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the meeting minutes.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion, comments, changes to the meeting minutes? There being none, please poll the board.
Mr. Marsicano?
Yes.
Ms. Padula?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Whittle?
Yes.
Chairman Barto?
Yes. Okay, at this point, we will open the meeting to comments from the public. Please note that we do not have any other public comments with projects this evening. So if anyone has a comment they'd like to bring to the attention of the board, please raise that now. And again, I'd ask if you're in the audience, just let us know that you'd like to do it. Come up and use the microphone and make a statement. If you're Zooming, please use the wave hand feature. Or if you are phoning in, text Bill Lewis at 518-376-1131. Opening the public comment period at 7:03.
When is the appropriate time for just a citizen to make a comment about?
That would be right now, Mr. Mandel. If you just go up and use the microphone, introduce yourself, your name and address.
I'm not very good at this.
That's okay. For a living, take your time.
And I would just start off by asking, I'm very limited here, but together with my daughter and my lady friend, they helped me over the last several of your board meetings. And I would like to just ask, I've heard presentations by the company that proposes either to oversee the building of the solar farm or to actually do the work. And I would like to know if there has been any effort to verify some of the things that they've said, specifically regarding National Grid and the limitations or the permissions that they have gotten to connect to the grid. Or is it just a matter of them saying what they've said and being accepted as such? I don't know if I have the right to ask that question, but I just thought I would ask it.
They've told us that they went to National Grid, and I do know that in order to get an interconnection, all the solar applicants have had to go to National Grid and find out, number one, is there capacity in the stations that are available nearby for them to get onto it, and number two, it is National Grid's determination as to where they will access the power lines. That's strictly in the hands of National Grid. We don't even get to review that ourselves. It's just a decision
So
Grid makes with the
I'm sorry.
As you say, it's a decision exclusively between National Grid and the applicant.
So I took the liberty probably 4 weeks ago to call National Grid. I called their contracting department, 800-260-4054, and I was referred to their website, which is Customer Electric Connection, UNY at nationalgrid.com, and was almost immediately contacted by a Eugene Hickok, who was an employee of National Grid, and in layman terms, described himself as the liaison, or part of his duties are as a liaison between National Grid and, amongst others, solar farms, at least in this area, that wish to be built, I guess, and be connected to the grid. And at that time, he told me that to his knowledge, there had been no communication between, I think it's COS, but I didn't write that down, the company that I believe has made presentations here. And that he would know that because, and I'm not quoting him verbatim, but that seemed to be an integral part of what he does. And he referred me to the Solomon Road solar farm to witness an example of work that this company has done. I also was referred to a site by Mr. William Lewis, who I think is the building inspector of the town. And he referred me to a Murray Road solar farm and to look at the connection that they made. I don't believe he told me that the company involved in the Austro site was responsible for the Murray Road site, but Mr. Hickok definitely told me that the Solomon Road site was constructed or overseen by this company. I think 2 weeks ago Monday, I happened to come up here, and at the time, on Route 29, in front of my house, they were installing poles. And I met with a James Yatto, James D. Yatto, Senior Supervisor, Capital Delivery Electric, these T line contracting, New York, I guess it's New England. He was in charge, he said, of the project to install these poles, the purpose being, according to him, that the substation, I guess it's to the west of my house, in the next town over, beyond Milton.
Galway.
Galway.
Yes, there's a substation that fails. And my house happens to be at, sort of like at the end of the line, and it's often you lose power when there are these events that occur. I know that I've lost power, but because you get a notice from National Grid, but I didn't realize that my house was uniquely weak that way. Apparently a good portion of Route 29 is witnessing the installation of new poles right now to upgrade the service along that corridor. He told me that he had absolutely, and there were 2 newly placed poles on the toxic waste side of the road that were placed, I guess, by National Grid, but most of them are on my side. And he told me that he had absolutely no knowledge of a proposal or a plan to connect a solar farm on the Austro site anywhere. He was just there to supervise this, as he called it, a multi-million-dollar project to increase the capacity of the grid on Route 29. I've had a couple of communications from, stupidly, I can't remember the name, but I have the emails, from a gentleman from this CSCOS company in Ontario, Canada, and also I think another person in Syracuse, and I met with an official from the company who took photographs along Route 29. And they told me what I believe I heard here, which was that National Grid told them that the only site that they could connect to would be Route 29. Now, I'm not saying anything that I'm saying, I'm taking a position, it's
Excuse me, Mr. Mandel, could you speak into the mic a
I'm
little
sorry.
clearer? Just speak into the mic a little clearer. That mic, yeah, put that mic in front of your face. They're having troubles hearing that in line. No problem. Thank you.
Well, anyway, I was told that National Grid has told them that the only location that they can connect to is 29. So I took photographs, and my daughter was capable of forwarding them to the planning. I can't do that stuff. I took photographs of the Solomon Road connection, of the Murray Road connection, and I took the liberty of taking photographs of the Middle Grove Road, the portion of Middle Grove Road that is occupied by 6650 Middle Grove Road, which is the address for the Austro home site, whatnot. And it seems that there are many routes to the solar farm from their location. And when you look at the wiring, and I know nothing about electrical grids, but if you look at the wiring on the road there, compared to the wiring that exists where I live, there's just simply no comparison. I mean, I clearly, actually, I took a photograph also of the pole by my house, which really looks like the end of the line. And so if they're maintaining that they've already cleared all of this with National Grid and told that the only site can be across from my property, I guess I'm under the impression, from what I've been told, that that may not be the position or where National Grid is right now. And of course, I'm not looking at the way these grids, these solar farms are connected to the grid. I'm not too keen on this happening right across from my property, especially when there would seem to be very viable alternatives. And the part B is, I understand they also want to put up a cell tower. I've asked a couple of times, but at the last meeting, I know I messed up the meeting 2 meetings ago because I had my phone and my computer on, and they were feeding back, and then, so last week I shut up, or last month I kept my mouth shut, and, but the camera was only to the back of the presenter and the back of the easel. And you couldn't see if they were showing where the cell tower was. You couldn't see it. So I would like to know. So I would like to know where it's going to be. And I would hope that the board would pay me the respect of either verifying what I've said and seeing whether or not there might be an alternative or way to connect the solar farm. That's all I have to say.
Sure. Thank you for your comment, and we will raise that with Mr. Davis when we get to his project. Here, I will give you this as an extra copy. This is the cell tower map that I'll map.
Chairman Barto, can you speak into your mic?
Yep, okay, sorry. Is there any other public comment at this time? I'm looking at the attendees out there. I don't see any hands raised or anything, so anybody else in the room have a comment at this point? If not, I will close the public comment period at, what my watch, 7:15 p.m. Okay, our first project this evening is the continued review of the Austro-Solar site plan and special use permit. Everyone should have before them any number of documents. I'm up to 32, but the only new one that we've gotten is we've received a revised decommissioning and reclamation plan dated August 16th, 2021. Last month, we closed our public hearing on the community solar project, and we're bound up to a 62-day time clock. We had focused the remains of our project on remaining comments on the project on the decommissioning plan, for which we have the revised version. Mr. Lewis, do you have anything to share with the board at this time?
I do not, Chairman Barton.
Mr. Bianchi, do you want to highlight some of your comments?
Yeah, the only comment was the decommissioning bond cost. They didn't provide a detailed estimate, but they did provide a cost of $40,000 per megawatt,
Yep.
which it was timely because we had done an analysis for another application that showed you what the cost per megawatt is
Yep.
from our experience. And that was on the higher end, so we said we would accept that as being a reasonable cost. And I believe the megawatt is what,
1.92.
1.9, so we thought that would be reasonable and acceptable items. That was all, that's all we had.
Okay. I know Mr. Davis is online, and your name again?
Adam.
Adam. So Bradley, is Adam going to do the presentation for now? You can unmute if you want. We're just going to go with Adam's presentation, Bradley? Okay. Go ahead.
Well, we're just continuing on from our last discussion in July. There was a few things that were brought up. Number one, the decommissioning, which we've already kind of talked about. We can talk about it more if need be. Number two was the DEC sign off of the DEC engineers. I believe you guys have that report as well. And I believe that was it. There was a third thing.
The pilot payment and community benefit.
Correct, right. So with the pilots, we've been in discussion with the 3 different jurisdictions. We're on agreement with the county on the pilot. For the town, we've agreed on the pilot amount. We're still we're very close on the host community agreement number. We'll get to an agreement on that very, very soon. With the school district, we're the same. Very close to, coming to an agreement on their terms on the pilot, and they have a community agreement as well that they'd like to sign. I think that was it, unless there was other items on your agenda that we had to address. I believe those are the items that we discussed in the emails that have been going back and forth for the past couple of weeks.
I would just, you heard Mr. Mandel's comment earlier. Could you or could Bradley address your communication with National Grid and how they're instructing you as to where your interconnection is?
Yeah, maybe Brad can talk about that a little bit more, but the only thing I would say is, we've gone through the appropriate channels a long time ago, about a year ago, with the interconnection application, and it's basically in their hands to kind of analyze the site and, decide which is the best end point of interconnection. That's, either lowest, the lowest cost for them or the closest proximity for them. So it's sort of out of our hands, in our opinion. I don't know if Brad has anything he wants to add.
Brad, you want to add to that? Hold on a second. I'm going to try to get this volume up here. We got a funky way we got to do this. Go ahead, let's try that.
Okay, how's that?
Can you guys hear that? Okay, good.
Good, okay, yes, thank you. Yeah, just to expand on what Adam said, I just to understand that Dr. Mandel had spoken to our project manager, Pat Dackery, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he let me know about the essence of the conversation. And he did assure Dr. Mandel that it is connecting a direct point of interconnection on the National Grid line. And the assertion that Sullivan Road is or could be a connection is it's just not true. It's only single phase power lines.
You're speaking to Middle Grove Road.
Oh, I'm from Middle Grove.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, I think my road is
It's okay.
on Middle Grove. It's only single phase power. And unfortunately, you just cannot connect the utility project to single phase power. That's just the nature of the grid. So as Adam mentioned, this is the only point of connection to the project. It would be financially reasonable from a connection perspective, from our perspective as the developer. And they don't give you additional options. There are no secondary options to connect. If hypothetically speaking, if there was a 3-base line on Middle Grove Road, we would absolutely connect to it because it's a far easier connection, but that's just not possible. So, given the choice, yes, we absolutely would have gone Middle Grove Road, but there is no choice. So, the only option was across from Dr. Mandel's property, and that's just the way it is. So, I know that spoke to him a number of times and explained that the situation, unfortunately, is just unchangeable from our perspective.
Do you have any communication with National Grid that indicates that that's where the connection on Route 29 will occur?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. During our interconnection facility study, that's where they pointed to the point of interconnection. So,
Can you just make sure,
proposal.
can you just make sure we have something on the record that documents that?
I mean, I can share the, what's called a CSER study with the board, and that's directly from the National Grid, and you have a copy of that, I'm sure it's a public record
Yeah.
as well, so I'm happy to submit that to you.
Okay. Right. Just so we have, that was, I mean, there's may well be miscommunication among National Grid staff, but Mr. Mandel was kind of indicating that at least the two individuals he spoke to said they didn't know anything about a project or an interconnection.
Sure, well, I know certainly you did speak to our project manager, who handles all of our projects, National Grid territory in New York State.
That's your project manager, but not National Grid.
So, it is National Grid's project manager
Oh.
who manages our,
And who is that?
his name is Eugene Hickenbach.
So, Mr. Mandel seemed to imply that Eugene Hickok said he did not know anything about this project.
No, he's intimately familiar with the project.
Okay. Okay. All right, does
So
the,
maybe, he may have just been erring on the side of caution for, confidentiality purposes, perhaps. I don't think they get a lot of phone calls from neighbors
Sure.
called directly to National Grid. Most of the time, concerns and complaints go to the town and the planning board,
yeah,
like the rest.
okay. All right. Does the board have any additional questions at this point in time?
Just, he did agree to provide that data.
He said, you said you could give us that SASAR report or a section of it that indicates National Grid's direction that you're to connect at Route 29. Which seems to make sense, and my other guess is you won't be able to connect until they do the service upgrade, which is happening
Well,
right now.
that's part of the interconnection. There are upgrades in that report that we have to do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify too, Mr. Mandel's statement before, the Soderman Road and the Murray Road projects were from Active Solar, and the Austro site is from Solar, different organizations, Mr. Mandel. The two that you went and visited on Soderman Road and Murray Road were installed by the same vendor. The one at the Austro site is a different vendor. They have, yeah, the Murray Road site and the Soderman Road site were done by Active Solar, which they're the same, pretty much the same vendor. This is a different vendor that's doing the Austro site. No, no problem, no problem.
I just had a couple of comments on, and it's in part relating to the decommissioning plan. The responsible parties, do we sufficiently document that the lessee is Renasola and or there are signs? In other words, sometimes these projects get sold after they're constructed or something. Can we get a clarification? Because I know that later in the document you do use that language, Renasola, or there are signs. I'd like to make sure that we have that because the lessee conceivably could change during the life of the project. The other thing was, as Joel clarified, the decommissioning security, just I wanted to make sure everybody understood it's 1.925 megawatts AC, and that's the standard that we went against, and it was $40,000 a megawatt or $77,000. And then at the end of the document in section 2.7, the decommissioning events, it got a little confusing to me, and mostly in a couple of citations that may be typos. We noticed that in one of them we refer to 15 years, and then you parenthetically put a 1. I think it's supposed to be a parenthetical 15.
Okay.
And then in Section 5B, or, hold on a second. Section C of the terms of removal, you reference 5B, Section 5B, I think that's supposed to be 1B. There's no Section 5.
Can you say that again? I'm sorry. Section.
Okay, so you're in terms and termination removal. Item C, it references, at the time the lease expires or terminated by the lessee in accordance with Section 5, that's supposed to be 1B, the paragraph above. And then in item D under there, you make reference to if the lessee is not required to post a decommissioning bond, but we are putting up cash, so I don't know why that's there, adding another $50,000 decommissioning bond.
Okay, that may be a relic from a previous, yeah, I can make that adjustment.
That's all I have.
Okay. Make those changes and we'll get that back to you.
Okay?
Sure.
Or, I don't know how the board feels, but are we in a position that we could make a decision regarding this project? Okay. Then, any other comments from the board?
I just have a couple of quick suggestions. I think perfectly fine, agreement in principle and decommissioning plan, no issue whatsoever. Got the financial terms squared away. The things that I would suggest the board consider are conditions. One, requiring that the decommissioning plan be filed in the Saratoga County Clerk's office. That deals with that successors and signs issue. Also, have a clear understanding, as the chairman has indicated, that both the owner and the applicant and their successors and assigns are bound. The other aspect of it, we do want to make sure that the DEC ultimately does pass on the decommissioning plan. And we did appreciate the sequence of events that you had presented. Have a local jurisdiction act first, then you'll submit it to DEC. But I think this board wants to make sure
We just want to make sure we get a copy of that.
that gets done. The financial security we've discussed, that's fine.
I was under the impression that you received the DEC report already. Is that what you mean? Or is it?
No, what we got was a statement that said DEC wanted to see the local jurisdiction make their decision, and then they would sign off on the final decommissioning plan, which you have 2 edits you're going to do.
Sure.
So that would be a condition, and I think we're good with that as long as we'll put it in as a condition, so we need to get a copy of that letter.
Okay. Want to make sure the pilot gets pinned down. And I think the other one that we had talked about was the revisiting to the extent that there may be some, determination in the future of inadequacy. But I think that's been covered. I think that was addressed.
Yeah.
And the pilot is very, very close. And so this is a project that has commercial operation sometime next summer. So the payments from the pilot will come until that time period. So I think there's some time to finish that out. That said, we're very, very close to having it wrapped up.
Okay. So with that, can we do this all as one resolution, or do you want us to do them as 2 separate?
I would do 2 separate orally.
So what I would do is entertain a motion for approval of the special use permit, subject to the terms and conditions that Bill just outlined. Do you want me to go through them one more time and make sure you've got them?
Sure. I think I have them, but it probably makes sense. I think Brad's on too, taking notes as well.
Yeah, and we'll get a copy of this to you
Great.
tomorrow probably.
Okay.
that we get out there. But the first would be that you comply with and perform in accordance with the attached decommissioning plan, and which is made part here of the approval hereof, and which the applicant and owner shall file with the clerk of Saratoga County. 2, that you cause and establish to the satisfaction of the town attorney that all agents, successors, and assigns of the owner of real property and the applicant shall comply with and perform in accordance with the decommissioning plan. 3, provide written proof acceptable to the town attorney that the decommissioning plan and landfill reclamation plan has been reviewed and approved by New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. Prior to the condition of the issuance of a building permit delivered to the town, the sum and proof of the satisfactory that the funds in the amount of $77,000 and $40,000 per megawatt have been paid and deposited into a restricted interest-bearing account.
Well, I'm sorry, the beginning of that was just the timing of it?
The timing is prior to the issuance of a building permit. 6, prior to, as a condition of issuance of the certificate of completion or closeout of the building permit for the proposed generating facility, the applicant agree to the payment in lieu of taxes for the applicable amount that we've got to determine. 7, as a condition of completing the decommissioning plan, making those few edits that we have done. 8, that the owner maintain and continue compliance with all laws, ordinances, rules, and regulations. 9, that the applicant and owner comply with and act in accordance with all applicable sections of the town code, all conditions and modifications of the planning board. And then finally, 10, applicant has confirmed that the decommissioning plan submitted to the town will be provided for in the land lease, and that such lease shall be contractually obligated to pay and perform all the conditions and requirements of the plan. Those are the conditions. So, do I have a motion to approve the special use permit?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the special use permit for the Solar Community Solar Farm at 6654 Middle Grove Road, subject to the conditions as written.
Second.
I'll second.
Any discussion? If there no discussion, call the board.
Mr. Marsicano?
Yes.
Ms. Padula?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Whittle?
Yes.
Chairman Bartok?
Yes. And then the next resolution is for the approval of the final site plan, subject to the same conditions that are outlined in the special use permit. I have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I so move.
Second.
I'll second.
Any discussion? If there no discussion, call the board.
Mr. Marsicano?
Yes.
Ms. Padula?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Whittle?
Yes.
Chairman Bartok?
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll make sure that a copy of this full resolution gets to you tomorrow, so you have it. If there's any questions, then just have you put it over.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Okay, next we have the application for a special use permit and site plan review for the construction of a telecommunication tower at 6650 Middle Grove Road on property owned by Mr. Lee Ostro. Again, there are several documents before you. We have several new ones for this month, and I'll just quickly go through them. We have correspondence from Thomas Shepherdson of Whiteman, Austria, Indiana, dated 7/29/21, a revised full environmental assessment form, part 1, dated 8/2/21, a revised site plan dated 8/13/21, a visual environmental assessment form undated, a response to MJ comments dated 8/4/21, an amended list of names and address of adjoining property owners within 300 feet dated 8/4/21, Exhibit I, Co-location analysis, Exhibit J, including an affidavit from AT&T and a letter addressed to SBA from 2020 requesting renegotiation on fees. A letter in response to the SBA Towers comment, Exhibit K. Response to MJ Engineering comments, Exhibit L. An additional photo simulation dated 8/13/21 and correspondence from our engineer, Joel Bianchi, regarding the second engineering review of the project to 8/16. Regarding seeker, we have classified this project as an unlisted action, although we did ask our engineer to conduct a coordinated review. Mr. Bianchi, I believe, started that today?
It'll start tomorrow.
Okay. We were waiting on some of these documents to come in and get done. As such, we cannot advance seeker at this time, and we'll complete our next steps in seeker next month, we hope. So we'll get that all done. Who's going to start with the project presentation? I don't know if it's Molly or...
It's me. It's Heather Carlisle. I am from Milton. And I was going to start by addressing the SBA letter that was submitted on July 21st. There were a couple things I wanted to clear up, and then move into kind of discussing a little bit more depth the co-location analysis for our meeting last month. So upon reviewing the SBA letter from July 21st, there were a lot of assumptions made that were patently false. I just wanted to address a couple of those in particular. Number one, the tower is being proposed at 150 feet. FAA was filed at 170 feet, but that was because we were including the height of the cranes that would be required for construction. Once the site is constructed, we're going to refile with FAA at the height of 150 feet. So it wasn't trying to be sneaky about the actual height of the tower. It's still planned for 150. It was just to include the crane as part of the FAA analysis. With respect to the site and its visual impact, we are proposing a monopine at this location. Those are typically the most visually unobtrusive towers that there are. There are branches on it to hide the antennas, and we did provide an updated photo simulation, and I did just want to briefly address that. The photo simulation was based on the entire property being cleared for the solar field, and I don't think that that's the case. I think there's still going to be a number of trees that are going to be along the road. So this is really worst case scenario in our most recent submission, and I don't think it's completely accurate. I think that it's going to be less visually, I think it's going to be more in line of what we initially submitted with the trees that are existing there. With respect to co-location, we did include an affidavit from AT&T swearing that AT&T has been on the tower since 2008. That was when the tower was built. And we requested to renegotiate the rent in 2020. AT&T requested to renegotiate the rent. That letter went unanswered. And it kind of goes to the crux of why we're proposing a new tower at this site, and it goes back to economics. SBA is really the only game in town when it comes to towers, and they kind of are able to set the bar with respect to how much they're going to charge for rent. And AT&T was locked in at that rate in 2008, and as part of the affidavit, it demonstrates that because of their pricing structure, which I can speak to in general terms, it would end up over the course of 20 years cost AT&T over $500,000 in excess costs that wouldn't happen if they were on the parallel infrastructure tower. I requested the actual numbers from AT&T with respect to the rent. They do consider that information proprietary, and my sense is that SBA wouldn't want that information to be public either, but I don't believe anyone is here from SBA to speak to that. But I can kind of talk generically about how the pricing is structured, if that would be helpful. So SBA charges per installation on the tower. It's part of their master agreement, so anytime that AT&T needs to do an upgrade or swap out equipment, based on that piece of equipment, that's what SBA will charge in terms of extra rent. The parallel infrastructure agreement is structured differently, that AT&T has 30,000 square inches of kind of free reign to put their equipment so long as the tower remains structurally stable. So that's kind of more from AT&T's perspective, on an economic level, that's more attractive to them in terms of being able to upgrade as future technology happens over the next couple of years. In addition, I did mention that they did try to renegotiate. I think that it's telling that AT&T kind of has an entire program that's structured against trying to find ways to negotiate these leases with SBA or relocate their equipment. The costs associated with relocating their equipment are substantial. Decommissioning off one tower to put on a new tower is no cheap task, I guess. And I think that the fact that AT&T is doing this across the country kind of indicates that this is a problem for them in terms of being able to continue to provide coverage in different areas of the United States. SBA in their letter also addressed secret, and you're maintaining these are two separate actions, the cell tower and the solar field, so we think that doesn't apply. And the final thing that they addressed in their application, in their letter dated July 21st, was that Tilson signed the application. We had submitted a redacted copy of the lease indicating that we had an agreement with the tower owner as part. If we need the tower, if we need the property owner to sign the application, we can certainly do that, but we were meeting that by submitting the lease. And I think that that's pretty much all I have with respect to the SBA letter. If anyone has any questions, I can put in.
Mr. Lewis, do you have any comments? Mr. Bianchi?
Our comment letter, we have, we talked about seeker, one item on the EAF, but the EAF needs to be addressed, but the EAF is substantially better. We are ready to circulate some of that change. The one item, this, I'm sort of working backwards. The visual simulation, we noted that they did update it for our request, and it shows the Mount Pine with the existing SBA power. So that's what we were looking for. It's really to the board's discretion on what can you mitigate under these circumstances. Some towers are very difficult to mitigate, but it is what it is, so the board needs to offer some conclusions on that. Site plans, there were not really many comments, but really I think I want to focus on the special use criteria. This is an unusual circumstance, and we talked about it last time. The town's code strongly encourages co-location of tall structures. It looks at existing users to co-locate on single towers. It also makes mention about making it economically beneficial. This seems to be the question is who's not playing by the town's code? Is it SBA who has an existing tower that was subject to the same codes when they were approved? Or is it AT&T trying to leverage better economics to locate a tower that is so close by? I think the issue, or what we've asked for, is what are the economics that are driving? What are the hard numbers? So that this board can aid. Is it reasonable for them to ask for a co-location or a tower in such close proximity next door? What is that number? Because what can happen is now someone owns another tower and has the ability to lease to other people, and they can pull everyone off SBA's tower, and now you have SBA's tower just sitting there. And now it becomes an unused eyesore. That could be the worst case. So that's where we're coming from. And I think it's the board's determination what you need. And also in that same scope is, absent that material, is the application complete? Because it's one of the criteria spoken about under the special use permit. I think those are the big items that the board has to sort of wrestle with. And a comment to the applicant, it sounds like AT&T is doing this elsewhere. Any place where you're doing it local to Saratoga County, New York State?
I believe so. I can definitely find
It would be,
that out.
it may be of interest to the board to see what's gone elsewhere. My closing remark is when we talked at the last board meeting, we indicated, MJ is not an RF engineer. We have engaged Bill Johnson, who's a PE, PhD. He reviews cell towers all across New York State. He's considered a subject matter expert. He will be reviewing this application shortly, but I really wanted to see where this meeting went, the direction the board gave them before we started to engage them. But he's on board. He knows of the unusual circumstances of this application. He thought it was interesting. He knew this was starting to happen. So he may even be able to add some insight to that topic beyond the RF coverage requirements. That's it.
Does the board have any questions or comments at this time? Go ahead.
Did I hear correctly that the cost was $500,000 over 20 years?
Over 20 years.
Did you also talk about two types of agreements for how you could knock the equipment? One was like a square inch,
Yeah,
and the other was,
it's really based on the size of the equipment. So instead of kind of having a blanket, area where they can mount their equipment, which is what parallel infrastructure structures are agreements to do, SBA does it by piece of equipment. So if you put up a new radio or if you put up a new cable, you would get charged based on their set rate.
and if you get a new tower, you can go to the other method you were talking about.
Yes, but there's no storage.
At $500,000, does that include that?
It's both, it's the one-time fees that they charge for applications in addition to the escalation. So there's typically an annual escalation or per term escalation in these leases. SBA's is bigger than parallel infrastructures.
Okay. And I know Joe mentioned he asked anybody else around had applied for this type of second tower. I don't know, was anybody approved for such a tower within close proximity like we were here? If you
I
get
can find that out for New York
yeah.
State. I personally haven't been involved with other ones in New York State. I was involved in one in Georgia, and it's a similar situation.
Similar proximity?
Yes. Actually, it was a little bit further. It was less than a mile, but it was,
Was it a similar environmental setting,
yes.
relatively
I
rural?
mean, they don't have, like in Georgia, they don't have seeker and they don't have, that kind of level of review, but there was a slight difference in the elevation. But they did have, a code that had preference for elevation.
I noticed that Jake Stricker has his hand up, so.
Okay.
That's pretty good. Go ahead, Jake.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. I just want to make a comment on the other site. This in Georgia, yes, it was similar NEPA report, environmental study. Doesn't have the same exact standards that the New York State. It goes off federal NEPA requirements. That answers your question.
Outside of that, the other thing, we mentioned it before, but we would need some background information on the decommissioning.
We do have the numbers. I did include the numbers, but I don't think we have the full-blown,
Okay, just,
step by step.
we'll want to see that
Okay.
for the next meeting
Okay.
on this. And then, I too am really hung up on this. We have a very strong co-location requirement for shall. And it's going to be challenging for us to get around that. So we're going to need some very sound rationale. I don't know how proprietary those figures really are. But I can respect that. We're going to have to get to somewhere on the numbers to rationalize our decision.
This needs
That's the
to,
standard
without Bill chime in, the basis of citing cell towers is co-location. This circumstance is allowed to say, we understand your argument, when we approve it, that, not that there's a lot of cell towers in the town, but that unfolds the next one. It says, all right, we want to do this because of economics, but there's no set standard or benchmark as what drives economics. You can do it anywhere, so now you could have 2 or 3 cell towers within a very close range, just because it becomes not cost effective any longer.
We've got to see it at fair market value.
Reasonable, fair.
Reasonable fair market value, so I know the applicant provided us it's 500,000 over 20 years, but there's really not something you can say whether one is reasonable or the other one is reasonable, right? So I know there could be deltas in things. If you go over a 20-year value, that's $25,000 a year, right? But
$68.48 a day.
exactly. So I'm sure that that is a bit more, that is something that the company would want to avoid if they could. But is the current one a reasonable market value or not? So, like the other ones we have in the town, are they using a similar structure, or are they using a different pricing structure? And are they a similar cost or non-similar cost?
I'm not sure.
Because your key argument here is, we can do this because this isn't economically feasible, right? So I think we're gonna need a little bit more about the economic feasibility, because AT&T would know what the other towers are in the area.
They would know, I mean, depending on whether they have an agreement with them, I mean, depending, you know, if it is a larger tower company or if it is just a, you know, smaller mom and pop tower owner that they're not on, they might not know. But I can certainly see if we can get some additional.
But there's several others around the area, so.
I think the board is trying to avoid Pandora's box.
Yep. I understand.
Jake, your hand's still up. Did you re-raise it, or?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Hold on.
All right, I would like to comment on the final hardship and the economic trickle-down effect that it would cause for telecommunications nationwide, as it would become public record. And allow me to be frank, would you or anyone in the board like to share their salary with the person sitting next to them?
As public employees, all these people share the
Yeah,
salary and
yeah,
New York.
I'll share.
And, yeah.
Where AT&T's coming from. So with that understanding is that the next carrier that wants to co-locate, which my understanding is the proposed monopine camouflage pole, is required to have 3 other carriers. There's only 5 carriers SEC that is actually allowed to produce a signal, for wireless signal. So this scenario of having 1 or 2 or 3 towers is not really applicable. I just wanted to comment on that.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I'd say to that is we currently have 1 that can hold up to 3. If we get yours, we're gonna have 2 that can hold up to 6, so we're already exceeding capacity. Something's gonna end up being abandoned.
I just wanted to make an easy comment.
I hear you.
Economic trickle-down effect.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things the board has taken into effect too is when we give out these special use permits, we may want to put a 5-year look at them again, if we're going to get into these types of situations. For cell towers specifically. Something for us to consider, but I think we are going to need some, because that's your main crux of your argument, right? So I think we need detail around that main crux.
Yeah, I mean, I understand.
Yeah.
It's definitely, you know, the whole reason why we're proposing this new tower, why Parallel is proposing a new tower, is because of the economics. And, you know, as I said before, AT&T has created this whole program because of this. So, I mean, I think that is telling, but I do understand the board's position that you want additional money.
Well, you know what additional things we need. Certainly if you want to have a working meeting in between with myself and Bill and with Joel, we would be happy to do that just to make sure that we get everything in order for next month. If we get everything, we get seeker done, we can move to the next stage.
Schedule a public hearing.
Okay, yeah, we'll probably definitely take you up on that. Thank you so much for offering, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Heather, I did have one question on the simulation, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fine.
This photo, do you know where to look application is from, because this is not from Route 29, otherwise you'd see a steep embankment of the, you
Yeah.
see a wetland and a steep embankment of the landfill.
I only assumed it was from Route 29 just because where everything was positioned. I completely speculated. That's why I was saying firm would have digital simulation to take time.
I
Jane
think they
might-
took it out. I think they took it out.
Unless that grass
I think that we did take it out.
was simulated out.
Yeah, I think that we took out all of.
Then the landfill's gone.
Yeah, so,
So-
I
so-
think that we took it all out, and I don't think that that's really what it's gonna look like.
So we might want to have you redo that.
Redo that so it shows, okay.
Yeah, because I know you guys made a comment that you don't think that's realistic, it's over exaggeration.
I think it is.
I think if you do a simulation, you don't see it, you might as well emphasize that point, because I looked at it, and the only place I could have was 29.
Yeah,
Hours
absolutely.
and
I'll get with Jake on that,
Okay.
and make sure that it's accurate.
I kind of took that as you were gonna redo it.
Hey, if you can get rid of our landfill.
You know? Just
No,
takes a
not,
little
you don't
Photoshop.
own it, town does not own it.
Well, not our landfill, get rid of the landfill.
Thank you again very much.
Thank you. Okay, the next project we have before us involves 3 proposed minor subdivisions for the Fair Oak subdivision on Stowe Church Road and the other one on Middle Line Road. The applicant is seeking 3 small lots to accommodate 2 mailbox kiosks and 1 subdivision sign on Middle Line Road. First, I'd like to make a motion that this is an unlisted action pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act.
I'll make that motion. Mr. Chairman, I'll second.
All right, with the motion is second, we have any discussion? Pull the board.
Mr. Marsicano?
Yes.
Ms. Padula?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Whittle?
Yes.
Chairman Barto?
Yes. I don't think we have anybody here to present the project. So I guess maybe we'll take a few minutes and discuss some of the questions that I have.
I have a couple of questions too.
Sure.
Why are we doing this? Why are we subdividing it?
So I think what they're proposing is that they are in a conundrum with the U.S. Postal Service. If you recall, we have been hearing for, boy, it's got to be 4 years or 4 or 5 years, that the Postal Service, in terms of achieving some of their efficiency and delivery standards, is looking at projects, specifically subdivisions that would be on town roads, and some other types of projects where they feel they would rather have one stop at a kiosk and put mail in a series of boxes than having to stop at each individual lot at the curbside.
It's not, this is really right now isolated server. It's not
Well, I
statewide.
take that, Bill and I have been able to find some guidance from the federal U.S. Postal Service that is putting this in place.
Right, but it's a local, I've seen it spotted.
Yes.
It's not like globally, it's really up to the local. I'm starting to see it implemented other places, but it's
Yeah.
not fully implemented as a policy, local policy.
Totally agree with that. It's just, they're doing it, and these guys got somehow stuck with it because our, they're calling the efficiency coordinator, or whatever the person's name is, at the Malta post office,
Yep.
has said, we want to do this. And they can't get certificates of occupancy until they have a means of postal delivery. So these guys went ahead and put in kiosks.
Oh, I'm fully aware about this.
And it's a little ahead of the curve there. They didn't come to us, they didn't have building permits or whatever, but they were, I think, stuck. So my questions relate to, one, we are looking at 3 separate subdivisions.
That is correct. Yeah.
So they're willing to pay the $500 per application fee to process this.
That is correct. I
Okay.
don't think they have an issue with that.
So we're gonna be doing 3 separate sets of decisions on this. And 3 separate seekers, or can we say this is segmented review and try to wrap them all into one?
One of them is a different site.
Still the same thing.
It's all the same
Phase
all
one
the same
location.
project?
Phase one and phase two were approved as a single major subdivision.
Okay, so one.
So do we need them to reapply as one subdivision, or are we gonna just treat all three in one secret?
One seeker.
Fine. Okay. So the next conundrum that we have is we are being asked to approve non-complying lots with non-complying uses. So in other words, in this subdivision, you have to be on the Stone Church side, a quarter-acre lot? Half acre lot. On the Middle Line Road, also a half-acre lot. Residential use, you could have accessory uses, but it's got to be a residential use as the primary use. They're asking you to put in very tiny lots. I don't even think they're an eighth of an acre. And structures that aren't necessarily permitted. We don't deal with mail keepers. We don't deal with mailboxes. So this could smack of the need for, number one, an area variance to get to the right size lot. And then number two, to also get a use variance to allow the use that they want.
So
So
also taking away the open space, right?
in one of the locations, they are encroaching on a dedicated open space lot, a very small piece of it. The other case, they're going to, and that one, this is on the Middle Line Road side, they are taking land away from a residential lot. And my only question would be is, by removing that land, do they still have a compliant residential?
They still have a conforming lot.
So,
I didn't see them redraw the lot lines.
they intend to do that.
No, I meant redraw the buildable area and stuff on the ones that they adjusted.
Well, now, the second one, that's over on Fair Oaks, on the Stone Church side, is in the stormwater management lot that eventually is going to be dedicated to.
Not really, I've showed you a few times.
So this would be a chunk of that out. And then the sign is going to be on Middle Line Road in an area that's mapped to allegedly be a trail.
Definitely walk through.
But I don't think the trails ever got approved in the final subdivision.
They did not, looking back on records, it did not get approved.
So, I mean, I think it's one thing we could say is, boy, the developers in the conundrum with the US Postal Service, a higher level of conundrum, there's not much we can do about that. So we could potentially even refer those two lots to the ZBA for area and use variances with a recommendation from us saying, we kind of really got to do this. And by the way, a recommendation to the town board saying, we really got to go in and amend section 152, is it, of our town code, or 154? No, 152 of the town code on highways and streets, where we specifically deal with mailboxes. And the only thing we allow in there are traditional curbside mailbox
There's not kiosks.
so we're going to have to deal with that in terms of getting this kiosk, come up with a standard of how we want kiosks to be dealt with in there. And then we'd have to go and amend our zoning that also says we regulate mailboxes in their kiosks. So they become, in this case, a standalone use on a lot that could be created in a sub standard. It would require a half acre for a kiosk.
You could almost consider it, you know, talked about it. There's been instances where lots that have utilities on pump stations, stormwater basins, where the geometry of that lot is irrelevant. Some of them have been improved without frontage, because it's not a building. You can almost categorize it and say, it's a lot for a utility. Kiosk could be considered a plaza.
Does he have to do it this way, or can he do it via these?
That's the.
The other thing is, we thought, is an easement or a license if possible way of doing it.
Because that would get us out of
Take
all
them
of
out
this.
of everything, correct.
Yeah, they wouldn't have to come back to the board really.
There's no
It's just the
subdivision,
use.
it's a use, and then it would be a deed adjustment, and the lease.
I did reach out to the applicant and suggest that too, but I have not heard back from the applicant.
I mean, there's legal things, you're gonna have to, have legal thing, you're gonna have to refile all your deeds and documents up, pay for all that stuff.
Yeah.
But this, they're gonna have to do that and this.
So I think most of the property that's in question hasn't been sold as residential yet. They're on a residential parcel that hasn't been built yet, hasn't been sealed or permitted. So it's something that could be adjusted in their deed to reflect an easement on the property. And that was, after talking with John and talking with the chairman and talking with the engineer, that was probably one of the easier routes for the applicant.
So those were a couple of things I was gonna bring up with the applicant, why did you pick this method? How did you split it up like this? That type of thing.
My understanding is they wanted to do, rather than homeowners association, do like an LLC, and they wanted that those parcels set for the LLC to be able to come in and maintain at, winter maintenance, summer maintenance. They were trying for the ease of it, they were gonna have a homeowners association.
Who is the LLC?
I don't know, that I don't
And
know.
that's the thing I worry about, you could have a paper LLC and there's no bodies there, and all of a sudden you've got a kiosk that's fallen down, gets hit by a car, it's gotta be rebuilt. How are you gonna do that, there are all kinds of things.
They would be paying taxes to the town, we'd have their tax information, and whoever's paying the taxes on it would be our enforcement. Go after
That or they don't pay the taxes.
And it goes
all of a
to
sudden-
default, and the county gets it.
Correct.
You guys own 3 kiosks.
And then if you do it, you should be an easement or a license, you still gotta have an entity by which is gonna be responsible for maintaining and improving and keeping these up. I mean, it's gonna have to be shoveled out every time it snows.
All very valid questions. What I've seen so far, and this is always an HOA, doing it for the kiosk thing has come up before final approval. This is where I will sympathize with the developer. It would be virtually impossible to form an HOA, especially in phase 1, when 25% of the lots have houses.
Yes.
Those people who say there's no way I'm joining an HOA, take care of those kiosks.
Yeah.
But the other lots that are now sold, they can do it. And phase 2, what is it?
So let me ask you this,
Space was 6 houses.
oh, the kiosks that are there.
Yes, kiosk and phase, there's.
So my question is, to what extent do we say, take the kiosk down, everybody go get a P.O. box?
Sorry.
Well, it's politically gonna be a nightmare, but, I mean, if you don't wanna get in an HOA, go get a P.O. box.
I don't know. That raises some.
Single family, single resident mailbox.
Right, so
I mean, that or do we go to the post office and say, you all came into this a day late, $1 short? We don't have an easy solution. Why does this have to land on us to solve it? We'd be happy to try to solve it. But the applicant doesn't even show. So that's where we're at.
Look forward to it next week.
I'm happy to have a good session with them.
Yeah, I'll reach out to the applicant again, and I see him on a regular basis, and I will bring the suggestion that the board brought forward in the meeting, and we'll go from there next week.
Okay. Is there any other business to be brought before the board? There being none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Second, John Miller. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining.